Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 2026 meeting. As you can see, this session is devoted to this topic, life beyond the wall, how to make hope flourish in prison. So it's not the word prison that actually characterizes this session, but rather the word hope. And the people you're going to listen to are going to tell us something about a tangible hope, a kind of hope that goes beyond what we learn from the media, from the newspapers. Actually, I am a journalist, so I am involved in this. But I've always been convinced of the fact that we need to tell something else about prisons. There's not only overcrowded prisons, there's not only suicides, there's not only aggressions. In prisons, in our prisons, we have a community of people who every day gets into these prisons and experiences also the noises, the very same atmosphere of these prisons. They hear certain noises, and because of these noises, they realize that you literally enter a different world. So every day there are volunteers animated by individual motivations, and they basically bring something of themselves. They actually bring a reason for hope. They actually bring their willingness to be close to the prisoners. I would have liked to start this session by showing you the video of the jailhouse rock played by the Blues Brothers in an iconic movie in which the band goes and plays music inside a jail. And then at a given moment, you have the prisoners who are all there listening carefully. They're under the control of the guards. And at a given moment, they start actually keeping the groove, basically. Volunteers do not bring only playful moments, but they bring themselves as individuals into the jails. So this is what I mean by hope. I mean, you have people meeting other people. For 10 years, I served as a volunteer in jail. And now I am involved with La Goccia di Lube, who is an association that basically follows people who are finishing their punishment outside jail. The first thing that struck me when I was in jail was that I was encountering somebody who was exactly like me. So if you look at somebody in the eyes, you really realize that you are made of the very same flesh, in a way. I'd like to start by introducing to you my guests. We have Antonio Baldissarri, the president of the Cidiesse social cooperative. The Cidiesse social cooperative makes a really fantastic experience with young people. It is really very, very hard to work with young people. I mean, we're dealing with people with everyday problems, and oftentimes they have to deal with issues like, for example, absent adults, or they have to deal with a past that has not been so encouraging and comfortable. So basically, the Cidiesse social cooperative teaches them how to work and to work for big corporations. Now we have Fabio Romano, a very dear friend of mine. Together with Fabio Romano, we set up a network of volunteers working in prisons, and it's basically telling us what we do and to coordinate ourselves so that more and more organizations and realities working in prisons can be added with this network. He is the president of Incontro e Presenza, involving 200 volunteers in the Lombardy region alone, which is exceptional. Then we have Iolanda Tortù, the Chief Commissioner of the Prison Service, commander of the EPM Beccaria in Milan, so the prison for minors in Milan. Iolanda Tortù has basically worked alongside her own career, siding young people. So she basically started as a young policewoman, and she's now become Chief Commissioner of the Prison Service. And she will tell us something about her experience now. And then we also have connected with us on Zoom the Deputy Minister for Justice, Francesco Paolo Sisto. So thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to close this session by asking for the opinion of Deputy Minister Sisto after having listened to these three guests of ours. So Antonio, you have the floor. Tell us something about what you do. Thank you very much. I am the president of the Cidiesse social cooperative that has been working since 1989.
Dipendenti e detenuti adulti.
It used to work with former drug addicts in the area of Bollate, Milan. And then since 2010, we have started working with minors because we have also seen the possibility of working in terms of prevention, especially with young people working in the area of Milan who have been entrusted to the social services in the area of Milan. In 2010, we opened a lab inside the Beccaria prison. And there we started training young people as, for example, cablers. We work on electric boards for automatic industrial installation. So there is, we have our own business, and we have basically customers exporting all over the world. So we carry out technical and technological work. And this kind of work is of great help in bringing forward pathways with these young people on a number of topics. The first topic we work on is identity. These young people enter jail, enter prison with a stigma. Their identity is that of basically evil people who do no right, who always do wrong. But actually, we involve them in technological work. We hire them, and they have to basically experiment themselves in the field of work. They have to experiment themselves in the world of work. They have to manage the money they earn, and so on and so forth. So the very fact that we welcome them, that we make this experience with them through our tutors and educators and our specialized skilled workers, all of this helps them promote themselves and see themselves in a different perspective. We're not only talking about people, young people who have not yet defined their identity, but they work, and by doing, they start learning that they have skills. They start valuing themselves again, because we are rewarding them. So basically what they do do technical work, and when the electrical board is being tested, that means that they have worked well. So that per se is a way of rewarding them. So they start interiorizing all the mechanisms typical of the work of world, which is characterized by a set of rules, and they are basically framed within a process that can bring to results if you do it well, and if you don't do it well, you also see results. And so there is this kind of interconnection of the working process. All of this becomes an educational pathway which is based on doing things, and this doing these young people doing things helps them developing their identity. And eventually, through this pathway, they will eventually become citizens. It is exactly the same thing as when you introduce yourselves. I mean, by working, you're given a role. You're being identified within a social context where work plays a paramount role. So you do have a lab inside the Beccaria prison, right? Yes, that's true. And then we have our headquarters in Milan. There we have our biggest lab. We have our various departments. I mean, we are a company. We produce electrical boards, but its main vocation is to, in a way, hire young people. And I'd like to stress this. I mean, we do hire our personnel. There are other realities in which, for example, people do internships, but actually the real working experience is that you are hired in a company, that you work side by side with our skilled workers. And so through work, 8 hours per day, we you get in touch with other people. I mean, the young prisoners of the Beccaria prison, they have a relationship with the adult world which is not good at all. So recovering their relationship with other types of adults, adults who are different than the ones that have characterized their context. I mean, that's paramount because that happens normally through work. There's no imposition. That's no school. We're not expecting from them that they do certain things. I mean, what we want to narrate is that we basically do a pathway with them and not for them. So basically, they go from their internal lab to work. And that was the second challenge. First challenge, teaching these young people, teaching work to these young people inside the Beccaria prison. Second, try and, in a way, reduce recurring crimes. You know that in certain contexts, you have over 75% recurring crimes. So the problem there is exactly this. If you have a prisoner working in the Bollate prison, or in the Beccaria, and as long as you are a prisoner, you have board and lodging. But then when you're outside work, oftentimes you don't have any place to go, and oftentimes they end up to the streets again, and this leads to a repeated crime. When the young people work at the Beccaria, there is basically continuity. Actually, they continue working with us. There are agreements with communities, hosting them up until the end of the pathway, and then at the end of the pathway, we basically disseminate the curriculum of these young people. And actually, there's lots of demand for skilled workers. And oftentimes, after really limited time, after just a matter of few hours, they're called. There's a request for the skilled workers. Nobody knows anything about their past, and they're oftentimes hired by major corporations based on their skills. And oftentimes, they are reconfirmed with a labor contract at an indefinite duration. And so the percentage of repeated crimes goes below 10%. So there's still one prisoner who unfortunately goes back to repeating crimes, but most of them continue working. Some of them become chief workers. In other words, this pathway helps them acquire the competencies, the skills, and the awareness of the fact that they do have a value. So they not only bring prejudice with themselves, but this awareness, and this is confirmed by the fact that they work well, they're hard, and they're confirmed, and then they oftentimes come back and visit us with their families and their children, and that's the best satisfaction we could ever have, because that's our ultimate objective. I mean, recovering young people who were considered to be doomed, and in fact, this has not been the case. They have proven that they are a resource. Always remember that prisoners cost about 60,000 euros per year. So it's always important for the community, for our community, to give these opportunities, these true opportunities of true work to these young people. And this is actually what we want to testify to this today with this session. Thank you. So being aware of the fact that our life has a value. This is what volunteers communicate, or what associations and companies communicate when these organizations enter prisons. And I think it is this experience of Incontro e Presenza. The very same name means meeting, encounter, and presence. So encountering, meeting these people, and being present together with adults. So young people and adults. So Incontro e Presenza has a 40-year-long experience. So Mr. Paolo Sisto, I'd like to stress this, 40 years presence in Lombard prisons, and this is something that has to be stressed. Yeah. So we've just heard the voice from Francesco Paolo Sisto. Thank you very much for being with us. Would you like me to comment immediately? Yeah, yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead. First of all, thank you very much. Warmful greetings to my dear friends of the Rimini meeting. I would like to apologize for not participating in presence. We have President Mattarella in Taranto today, so I needed to be there. The president, the Italian president is visiting Apulli, so I had to be there. So apologies for not being in Rimini. I'd just like to stress that volunteering associations are fundamental in prisons. The previous speaker said it well. We need to work not for prisoners, but with prisoners. I actually I am a music fan, and I played in prisons together with prisoners. I promoted music and art initiatives inside the jails, and the art initiatives have been really fantastic. I mean, prisoners started painting with teachers of academies of fine arts, and actually what I would like to say is that it is necessary to not only to show interest, but rather to participate. We need to give prisoners this idea of hope. But hope also means responsibility. That has to be said loud and clear. And hope means that if you access hope, at the same time you have to be responsible for that hope. As the Constitutional Court stated in a ruling on the affectionate in prisons, I mean, the state has the responsibility of opening up hope at the prisoner, at the same time has the obligation of accepting this offer, of actively participating in this. So after listening to the words repeating crimes, I mean, we work in prison, repeated crimes are as low as 2%. So work is like therapeutic, it's like therapy. We need to avoid depression and disdain in prison. If the logistic conditions do not respect the minimum human rights, that's, of course, that hasn't to be the case. We have to give prisoners dignity. I mean, it lies in our DNA that actually human rights and dignity have to be maintained in prisons. I'm referring not only about logistics, but also about people. Much depends on people. You may, write down the best norms in the world, but if you don't have the right people interpreting these norms in the best way possible and in the most effective way possible from an emotional point of view, well, that's work wasted. So we need investments in people. So we need to have the right logistic conditions and especially the useful hygienic conditions. I've seen prisoners who, after 4 months, still hadn't had the possibility of being visited. I've seen cancer patient prisoners that were not visited. Actually, the health system does not depend on the ministry, it depends on the region. So it's fundamental that we have to guarantee that in prisons we need to have a health system that is capable. So there has to be continuity between the external continuity and the prison continuity. There has to be no difference. And this issue of hope is fundamental to avoid basically this. And then depression. Depression is what ultimately leads to suicides or harmful acts, and this is a direct consequence of a lack of hope. In 2025, 2026, the Council of Ministers directly intervened on prisons. We did a lot for for prisons, we actually multiplied by 10 times the number of prison workers. We have a building plan for our prisons, which is expected to add additional 10,000 posts. And there's a very recent law, 140 of 2026, that gave drug addicts the possibility of being treated outside prisons. So there has been an increase of measures alternative to imprisonment, which is really significant. In the first month of this year, much has been done in this respect, testifying to the very intimate level of affection and of attention, of the government. But that's a real difficulty. But overcrowding is a real difficulty. But nobody has a magic wand like that of Harry Potter's. I mean, that's something that has to be done progressively, based on merit. I mean, we are not basically kicking somebody out because the lease has been ended, but re-education that has been enshrined by our constitution is particularly valued. So re-educating means basically that is an objective that always has to be pursued. So politics have to do their job. We have done investments, for example, on psychiatric patients. Of course, much more has to be done. The actually work is important for prisons, but this teamwork that sees the participation of health organizations, the government, the police, and so on, I mean, is done correctly. I mean, the police, policemen in prisons are heroes. Lots of suicides have been avoided because of it. Of course, everybody may commit mistakes, but actually, there have been few people who've worked badly, but there are many, many more who make our prisons a place of hope.
Thank you very much. What you said honors your role and your person. It is also important to underline an aspect. While we are experiencing difficult situations, as you described, had we not people coming from outside and entering the prisons, we wouldn't have any prospects for hope. I totally share your view. This is why we underline with this attempt to create a network between the various realities, because we want to facilitate the external world that meets the world of the detained people. Fabio, would you like to tell us what you do? Thank you. I would like to start from an introductory remark I made several years ago during a meeting, mentioning an African proverb. In order to educate one child, you need the entire village. And this may be transferred to our world. And I said at that time that in order to re-educate a detained person, we need a village. The universe of a jail is made of complex relations involving the detained people, all the operators, lawyers, all the policemen working in the prisons, training entities, enterprises, universities, associations. So all of these stakeholders are players opening up to concrete possibilities for social reinsertion. And then we have priests, nuns, and volunteers. And that's another part of the universe. This is also a world, so to say, that is buried. There are many cultural and social buildings. People have common objectives and interests, but also different starting points. So education and accompanying people towards a humane recovery and a full social integration is the common goal that is a part of this entire village. We know that there are thousands of volunteers giving their time to support the fatigue and the work of detained people and their families, favoring solidarity-based values. And all of these components create the village, as I like to say, this village which attempts to re-educate people. Prisons, as we know very well, is a mirror of our contemporary society. It is a sort of an amplifier. Everything is magnified within a prison. You find everything in the prison: rebellion, frailty, suffering, addictions, fears, solitude. But you also find brotherhood, hope, and friendship. One may say, well, it's very weird. It is true. As weird as it may seem, despite the facilities, despite the old buildings, despite our popular culture, which is still, which still tends to say, okay, well, if you are a detained person, you deserved it. So you deserve being sanctioned, you deserve paying for your offenses. Since you are a troublemaker, you deserve to stay in prison. And then there are those who say, state that you should leave them in jail forever. And that's an extremist kind of attitude. But we need to start from a figure. We should never forget why a person got to prison. We cannot pretend that there are no victims. We cannot pretend there was no condemnation, no sentence. But it is also important to understand that the evil these people did is not the last word on the lives of these people. I never justify an offense or a crime, but in every situation, I always think that you can be able to stand up, to be re-educated, to become a new person for the first time. Because the place which may be a place of injustice, namely the prison, is a place for atonement, but it is also a period in which you can take your life back in your hands. You should reflect on what you did. You should reestablish and recover the relationships you've broken with your family members, and you should rebuild a pathway made up of hope, or for the first time in your life, you should take a different pathway based on novelties, emotional relations, and lawfulness. So entering a prison, meeting a person who committed a crime but who remains a person, means entering into a relationship with the detained person, with a person, and with the world around this person. We work with them, along with them, several hours a week, and we live with them the same life. We share the same lives with them. We live in the same place they live in. And often, this aspect cannot leave you without any thoughts. It is a sort of a provocation in many instances. We should also think about the fact that we enter prison to create a dialogue with the people, and many relations were born only thanks to silence. We only listen to the anguish, to the frustrations of these people, and to the lives they live. What do you concretely do? How many times do you enter the prisons, and what do you do in practice? As Incontro e Presenza, as an association, in the majority of the activities we carry out, we enter the prisons to carry out interviews. So we, on every Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, for free, we enter the prison. We enter the prison and, well, pay attention to this aspect. I'm always surprised about that. Our meeting is a meeting of two liberties. We are free to wake up and go to the prison. No one forces us. On the other hand, on the other side, you have a person who freely decides to accept your invitation to meet him or her. So this exercise of putting together the liberty between two people, carrying out a meeting, is incredible. Let's think about many environments and many contexts from which our friends come. The word freedom or liberty takes on a totally different meaning to them. It does not mean accepting an invite to have a chat with one of the volunteers of our association to tell them how your week was. So I'm always struck by the fact that the volunteering experience in jail, well, I tend to embrace them all. What is a very interesting point for rebirth is the fact that there is a possibility that is given to the detained people, which should not be taken for granted. The possibility to have access to that place, each bringing his own or her own experiences. To us, this gesture for volunteering in the jails is a charity-based kind of activity. So we are based on charity, and we always bring home more than what we bring to the detained people. And this is surprising. We always say that we never exit the jail the same way we enter the jail. We always bring something back home. We are enriched by this experience. We are always struck by some aspects. There's always something that reminds you of the reason for which you decided to wake up, get up, and go to the jail. And it's something incredible, because you would never expect such a thing. Thank you very much. I would like to interrupt you for a moment, because what you said from a professional point of view, as far as I understand, is exactly what our friend here, what Iolanda experiences every day. Would you like to tell us a bit about your story? I started to work in Beccaria in 1999. I was private. I worked there for 20 years. I met many minors. I was a policewoman. Then I became an inspector, and I went to work to another jail, that of Bollate. I worked with Incontro Presenza. And when I had a chance as a commissioner to get back, I went back to the Beccaria. It was a choice. I chose it. I would never have left the Beccaria jail, but I had to leave because the inspector at that moment at the Beccaria was not, there was no vacancies, so I had to make a different choice back then. But I decided to go to Bollate, which was more of a hope-based place vis-à-vis other jails. This is the topic we're talking about. And working with minors as a policewoman led me to wish for something more. It helped me become what I am today. It's inevitable. That place was a source of inspiration for me. And it led me to think about the real philosophy of a jail such Beccaria at that time. The philosophy remained the same. The philosophy of the jail is that of re-evaluating a pathway for life with minors through several steps. So getting back to the topic of the minors, of the young people detained in this prison, that what my colleagues come to terms with every day. I start from the motto that we have in our prison police, which is guaranteeing hope. This is our task, and this is the motto of the corps I belong to. Of the armed force I belong to, and this is something I cherish. We always meet desperation at the beginning at least. When these young people come to jail, they are all desperate, not only in terms of not only material terms. They are desperate because in their heads they experience themselves as failures. They cannot perceive any prospects for the future. They can only see they have come to jail. They have entered a prison. So they are all in the same mood. They are a failure. This is the way they perceive themselves. And they've also failed when committing a crime. They were not good at committing a crime, which was, in many instances, the only thing they think they're good at. They wanted to be excellent offenders, and they did not manage to even commit a crime, and they ended up in prison. And there's also another failure of those who enter the prison for several times. They are repeat offenders. They did not manage to remain in a community because the community was not good enough at setting limits. They need limits, they need frontiers, and they need adults who need to be honest, frank, present, and consistent. This is what they need because they grew up with absent adults, many of them, in the majority of cases, and they found their way to become adults in crime. So the fact of having adults who are consistent and who are honest towards them and bringing a model for lawfulness and respect, they have a very distant idea of the armed forces. They think that the armed forces, the policeman is someone who arrests them and brings them to jail. We are different because in many cases we are forced to report the detained young people because they breached some rules within the prison. We managed to build relations, and even after being reported, they are informed of that, they continue to work with us, and we rebuild our relationship with these young people. We start from them. We start from that mistake, and there was a betrayal of expectations because the official feels betrayed, the educator feels betrayed, and we need to reestablish a relationship with them. For these minors, this is the fact of being willing to rebuild a relationship with them is a source of hope, because they know they can restart. They can carry out a fresh start. Hope can be found in a cooked meal, in clean linen. This is the first thing they find. They meet an official who had already met them in their previous detention period. It is true that they failed. They enter the prison once again, but they find the same official, and they remember their previous experience, and the educators and all the other professionals are also very important. And the important thing is a network that we managed to create. And this is the only way we can build a relationship. Adults need to be consistent in their relation, and they are a starting point for these young people. When they find the same response from the official, from the volunteer, from the educator, from the employer, this is a confirmation they are on the right way. They are on the right path, and they can recover some trust. So from material aspects, we move on to immaterial, intangible objectives. For instance, getting a diploma. A young boy entered a prison because of an old crime. He was desperate, of course, because his mother had died just 6 months before. He didn't have a father any longer. And I talked to him and I said, okay, you need to benefit from this time. You still have 1 year and 4 months. And he answered, the first thing I would like to do is to achieve a diploma that can be useful once I get out. So school, the workshop to become, when you can learn to become a carpenter or a confectioner. All this enables a young person to have a different idea of him or herself and a prospect for the future. Young people always come to ask for work. They want to work. They know that there is an inspector, female inspector, dealing with chores to be carried out within the jail, cleaning the common areas, or working in the canteen. Since these young people know that I am the one giving the green light to these liberty spaces, there was a young boy from Catania, and he said, I want to speak to you first, because I know that if you say no, I will not be able to work. So you're the first person I turn to. So we carry out our work, trying to have them tolerate waiting. Teens cannot tolerate waiting periods, and even less so in jail. So we carry out our work. We say that to these people that we're going to observe them, we are going to keep an eye on them. We want to know whether they are able to do something or not. They become self-confident only if they understand that we trust them, especially us. So we need this kind of people in order to make a prison a place of hope. This is the kind of people we need. I would like to say that many of my colleagues behave exactly in the same way. They are only less visible than I am. All the colleagues working in the same section, the majority of these colleagues are those welcoming and receiving the most desperate young people. Most of young people cry at night. The self-harming behavior are carried out in most cases at night. And these are, my colleagues are those who take care of all these behaviors and all these situations. They receive and they are in charge of having to come to terms with all these desperations, and they're able to give all these young people hope, reminding them all the beautiful things they did in other moments. These young people cannot be identified only with the offense. They did beautiful things, and they have lots of resources. They've lived lots of life. They've lived lots of lives, despite all the complex situations we have to face. We have young people who cannot be, who do not fit into a category. They are teens. They may have no parents. They may only also have addictions, and they may also have learning problems. This is a complex task. We need lots of people working together. We need officials creating frontiers and creating limits for these people. We need the other operators, and Milan is a very fortunate town, because the Lombard region and the town of Milan are present in the prisons, and it's not possible to carry out this complex work alone. So what changes things is the person within a jail and within an armed force. As you said, you have a very beautiful episode you can tell us. We are now telling positive things. So I would have many episodes.
The first episode concerns one of the very first young people we dealt with. This guy came from a well-off family, so basically he spent little time at the Beccaria prison because his family had very good lawyers. Nonetheless, he went his own pathway, and while I was looking for skilled men, he answered the job advertisements after some years, and basically he said, I would like to return some of the things I was given back. So I hired him. After a few years, he became independent, so he started his own business. And this is one of the examples of how people truly change. Young people can truly change. They make their own experience, and then they understand, they truly understand what kind of occasion they were given inside prison within the context of a pathway that is similar to that of a village, where basically where everybody plays their own part. And then I also have another episode. This refers to a guy that was a true troublemaker. In the very last part of his pathway, he came to us. Also with us, he basically did very wrong things. I mean, the sense of lawfulness was not so clear to him. But then eventually he came to the end of his pathway. He went to work for a company doing very interesting things. And then at a given time, his employer, about a year after he was working for them, he basically inquired basically who did what. Everybody was afraid of that. And instead, he came forward and said, actually, it was me. I did this kind of work. And so the employer basically said, okay, you should all follow his way of working. So he praised him in front of the others. And after 6 months, he became a foreman. And he was truly, truly proud of that. So he immediately told us about that. He wanted to share this piece of news. And that was a great result he achieved, a great personal result. And eventually, he would often basically drive his father's cars without a driving lesson. And he said, well, actually, now I do have a driving license, and now I bought myself a used car. So the very same concept of lawfulness very much depends on the type of experience that you make with these people. So these are just 2 anecdotes, but there's many more I could share with you. Like, for example, the anecdotes, the episodes of people, one coming from Egypt and the other one from Morocco. They came to us, learned the job, and so they came back to their countries after a few years, and they started their own business in the electrical field. So these are really exceptional results, and we're very proud of them. We produce electrical boards that are exported all over the world, but nothing is so rewarding like the human results we achieved of these young people every year. And this is how you build a new society and a new civilization. There's one thing I'd like to add. I believe that I think that prisons have to be some kind of a home for humanity, because it is through humanity that these people can become true individuals. And we have to make sure that humanity becomes prominent and visible in all of its facets. So, Mr. Deputy Minister, please help us do these things. Well, I'm really touched after listening to this narrations. I have, however, to be very pragmatic. The situation in jails is not always so beautiful, but much of this depends on the fact that we have to deal with people who come from highly degraded backgrounds. So the term lawfulness, legality, is not well known to them. And this means that oftentimes they take shortcuts and aim for earnings and profits which are not made lawfully. Of course, there are very good examples. They shouldn't be isolated results. We should make sure that these results can be expanded all over Italy. We're talking about privileged prisons, but at the same time, we also have other prisons who do not have these experiences. Of course, what matters most for us is the people who are the most abandoned. I've recently visited a number of prisons, and in these prisons, actually, you really need the very basics in order to live in health. I would also like to add that minors have a bit changed, and this is addressed especially to the policewoman present with us. For example, at the beginning of my career, we had the habit of having people of age who would hire minors to be self-protected because the crimes made by minors were not considered and treated the same way as the ones done by people of age. But actually, the concept of violence has expanded. We have the issue of baby gangs, and this they have to be viewed within the context of this gratuitousness work, like Father Giussani said. By this, I mean this commitment on the part of the public and the private sector. We are often tempted to say that the public is good and the private sector is not good, but we have to start from the opposite perspective. The private sector deserves respect as much as the public sector does. I believe that this requires a village, a true village. And this village is made up of a whole series of individuals. And so the fact that the private sector becomes not so much an area of suspicion, but rather a concept, a field in which you have the capacity of expressing lawfulness and correctness is fundamental. In other words, we have to make sure that these people become different, that they change, that they can truly understand how they can change for the better in prisons. Oftentimes, they change for the worse. Oftentimes, when you are in prison, negative things happen, but we have to do whatever it needs to achieve the opposite. I believe I can say that the onset of the presence of private people inside prisons can, in a way, control the conditions in jails. This might sound paradoxical, but if you have a private sector helping prisoners and who do their best for prisoners to change, makes sure that those prisoners are correctly managed inside the prisons. And so there is basically a reciprocal control. And this makes prisons a place that need to be privileged. And I'd like to add one final consideration. Prisons are places of repression. It is correct that one is deprived of our own freedom because actually we have committed a crime and because you have to be re-educated. But at the same time, we have to say that sanctions and prisons always arrive too late. The focus should be on prevention. Prevention should be better valued vis-à-vis repression. Since the Cartabia Act, we have now been tempted to think that prisons are one of the penalties. So the prison is not the only way of punishment. We also have other ways of punishing crime offenders. All of them have to be, in a way, resorted to in order to make sure that prisons are not the only place. So prevention. The focus is on prevention. We could give our children the possibility of understanding that culture means lawfulness. So in this synergy between families and schools, we need to give young people the certainty that if you know more, you can become more lawful. Lawfulness stems from knowledge. Oftentimes, certain rules are broken because of ignorance, because one is not aware of the fact that we can learn. So if we could, in a way, anticipate the presence in prison and maybe introduce lawfulness to our young children when they're very young, when they are 4 or 5 years of age. So the concept that knowledge leads you towards legality, I think that this can help us a lot also in meeting these commitments inside jails with the serenity of a modern state. Much has to be done. The state needs to do more, but I am convinced that in this synergy between the public and the private sector, we can find a solution for our prisons to become places of hope. Thank you very much. There is a private player that goes and meets other private people because of this, and I think that Fabio can tell us a lot on this. Well, I'd like to reply to the comments by Deputy Minister, because we have to be very realistic. Oftentimes, the conditions of our prisons oftentimes do not favor new beginnings, but there can be new beginnings, and I can testify to this. We've been visiting dozens of prisons for many years, and we can actually say that this can happen. Civil society should pose itself a question. That is, if it is true that the penalty, the punishment that does not erase human dignity, and that this should be, that it should turn guilt into responsibility. Well, if this is true, how can we continue believing that the life of a prisoner is not entitled to hope, to the hope for a better future? How can we do that? Prisons shouldn't be seen as the ultimate act of justice. I mean, like the very deadly ultimate one. But it has to be thought as the very first step of a pathway whose aim is to basically recover what was not done, and what can be done. We are always very much struck by the fact that actually there's one person we've been meeting in jail since 1992, so a prisoner who spent his whole life so actually in jail, and actually by studying he recovered himself, basically went to middle school and then to high school, and then eventually he graduated in pharmacy because he was given the grant to exit prison, and now he's basically graduating in medicine. And what's surprising in this is that probably there's somebody here in the room who are basically university mates. They're doing now an apprenticeship. He still has an exam left to be graduated. Given the norms currently in force, he probably won't be able to serve as a doctor. But his biggest hope was that actually his mother wanted him to be a doctor, and he would like to work in the emergency and urgency department of a big hospital. So these are the last words I'd like to share with you. So there is a network of solidarity based on volunteer work, based on experience, as Fabio said. And this experience is present all over Italy. I've received messages from Catania, Teramo, Reggio Emilia, Sulmona, Bologna, Pescara, from prisons in Lombardy, Pesaro, Ferrara, Cuneo, from the communities of Papa Giovanni XXIII Association that give hope to prisoners who basically get out of jail so that they can basically find an accommodation. Then on Enzo Zannoni in Forlì and 70 volunteers and his 70 volunteers. In other words, these are just minor examples of a gratuitous reality that is offered to those who are determined and who are not seen as somebody who's made a mistake, but they're seen and supported as somebody who are basically like ourselves. And I think this is something we should work on. Fabio and I met, and actually the meeting we are hosting today stems from a meeting between this small network of associations working in prisons in a parking lot of the Rimini meeting. I mean, we were surrounded by the cars of the police forces, and everything started from there. We'll certainly make additional steps forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Minister, for your participation. I'd like to conclude by actually launching an appeal. Together with my association, La Goccia di Lube, I deal with alternative measures. We really need for the Parliament, Italian Parliament and government to extend the benefits of the Moraglio law also to people who hire who are under alternative measures, who basically are more than prisoners, 84,000 at the end of 2025, as against 64,000 prisoners. So please help us. Well, actually, this is an appeal that I'm very glad to welcome. This is just to, share with you that we believe in that. We have basically took after all the roles of surveillance magistrates. Actually, we've seen about 12,000 alternative measures in the first months. So the need to consider alternative measures today is very much present. We need, of course, to basically have an exchange of views with our colleagues at the Ministry for Finance. But as you rightly teach us, we are guided by hope. So this is a message to you all, both present and online. In conclusion of this session, there's something I'd like to share with you. Each and any one of us can support the meeting, and thereby we can contribute building places of love, beauty, and hope. In the trade ground, along the entire trade ground, you find counters under the name Dona Ora, which is the fundraising initiative of the Rimini meeting. They are characterized by the red heart. So if you support the Rimini meeting, you can have tax advantages when you do your tax declaration. So please, thank you very much to the Deputy Minister. Thanks a lot to our hosts, Antonio Baldissarri, Fabio Romano, and our very dear Iolanda Tortù. Thank you very much to you all, and enjoy your stay at the Rimini meeting. Thank you, and bye-bye to our Deputy Minister.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.